Some people come back from the edge of death and say they saw something they can't explain. Not just a blur, not just a dream. They say they floated above their body. They say they moved through a tunnel. They say they met dead relatives, felt a love bigger than anything on earth, or watched their entire life play like a movie. And here's the part that makes this so hard to shrug off. Some of these people were unconscious. Some had no heartbeat. Some had no measurable signs of normal awareness. So the obvious question is, how can a brain that seems to be shutting down create one of the most vivid experiences a person ever has? If that question bothers you, good. It should. Near-death experiences sit right on the border between medicine, memory, consciousness, fear, hope, and whatever you personally think might happen after we die. So let's take this seriously without pretending we know more than we do. What do people actually report? Why are the stories so strangely similar? And what could the brain be doing in its final moments that feels so much bigger than ordinary life? Let's start with the basic scene. A person nearly dies. Maybe their heart stops during surgery. Maybe they drown and get resuscitated. Maybe there's a crash, a coma, a severe allergic reaction, a battlefield injury. Later, when they're awake, they say something happened while they were gone, and they usually don't describe it like a normal dream. They describe it like an event, clear, bright, meaningful, sometimes more real than real life. That phrase comes up a lot, more real than real. Which is strange because dreams can feel real while you're inside them, but they often fall apart when you wake up. A near-death experience, or NDE, can stick for decades. People remember the details. They may change their values. They may lose some fear of death. Some become more spiritual. Some become confused or isolated because the most important experience of their life is something other people may not believe. So what are they seeing? The classic near-death experience has a few familiar pieces. Not everyone gets all of them. Some people get only one, some get none. But the famous pattern goes like this. First, there's a feeling of leaving the body. The person may say they were above the room, looking down at doctors working on them. They might see their own chest being compressed or hear fragments of conversation. This is called an out-of-body experience, which just means your sense of where you are seems to detach from your physical body. Then there may be movement through darkness, often described as a tunnel. At the end, there may be a light, not just a lamp or a spotlight. People often describe it as warm, intelligent, welcoming, or alive. Then come beings, a dead parent, a grandparent, a religious figure, a presence that doesn't have a face but seems personal. Sometimes the person feels completely understood, like every secret is visible but there's no judgment. Then there may be a life review. Not like remembering a few birthdays, more like seeing the emotional impact of your actions. You don't just remember yelling at someone, you feel what it felt like to be the person you yelled at. That's why these experiences can change people. They're not just dramatic, they're moral. And finally, there's often a border, a door, a river, a gate, a line. The person knows that crossing it means they won't return. Then they're told, or they decide, that it's not time. And suddenly, they're back in the body. Pain returns, noise returns, the hospital ceiling returns. Now, before we jump into explanations, we need to clear up a big misconception. A near-death experience doesn't prove the person was literally dead in the everyday sense. In medicine, death isn't just one switch flipping off, it's a process. Your heart can stop before your cells are dead. Your breathing can stop before your brain tissue is permanently destroyed. Doctors can restart circulation after minutes, and sometimes longer under special conditions. So when someone says, "I was dead for 4 minutes," what usually means is their heart wasn't pumping effectively, or they had no pulse, or they required resuscitation. That's still serious. Very serious. But it also matters because the brain doesn't instantly become nothing the moment blood flow drops. It goes through a chaotic emergency. Think of a city during a blackout. The streetlights go out, backup generators kick in, alarms fire. Some systems fail first, others flicker for a while, and emergency signals blast through places that are usually quiet. The brain under extreme stress may be less like a TV unplugged from the wall and more like a city losing power unevenly. That uneven shutdown may explain a lot. So why the tunnel? One possible explanation starts with vision. Your eyes don't create sight by themselves. They send signals to the brain, and the brain builds the visual world from those signals. The back of your brain, especially an area called the visual cortex, is heavily involved in that process. When oxygen drops, visual processing can get weird. The outer parts of your visual field may fade first. That's peripheral vision. If the edges go dark while the center stays bright, it can feel like you're looking down a tunnel. You don't need death to see a hint of this. Pilots under extreme G-force can get tunnel vision because blood drains away from the head. People fainting may see darkness closing in. The brain isn't calmly filming reality. It's fighting to keep a picture together with less fuel than it needs. But the tunnel isn't the whole story, because a tunnel is just geometry. It doesn't explain the feeling of peace, or the life review, or seeing grandma. So let's go deeper. Why do people feel calm even when their body is in disaster? This is one of the strangest parts. You'd expect panic, and some near-death experiences are terrifying, to be clear. Not all are peaceful. Some people report fear, emptiness, or disturbing scenes, but many describe overwhelming calm. One possible reason is that the brain has emergency systems for pain and fear. Under extreme threat, the body can release chemicals that change perception. Endorphins, for example, are natural painkillers. They're part of why someone with a serious injury may not feel full pain right away. The brain can also shift attention. In trauma, people sometimes report feeling detached from the body, like the event is happening to someone else. That's called dissociation. In plain language, it's the mind creating distance from something too intense to process normally. Near death, dissociation could become dramatic. If the body is full of pain, alarms, and failing signals, the brain may create a protective separation. The me watching from outside, rather than the me trapped inside. That sounds weird until you remember that your sense of being inside your body is also something the brain constructs. Right now, you feel like you're located behind your eyes. You feel like your hands belong to you. You feel like up is up and down is down. That all seems obvious, but the brain is constantly stitching it together from vision, touch, balance, muscle feedback, and memory. When that stitching gets disrupted, the sense of self can move. Scientists have even triggered out-of-body-like experiences by stimulating a region near where the brain blends body position, vision, and balance. If that area gets scrambled, the brain may no longer agree on where you are. And when the brain has conflicting signals, it makes its best guess. Sometimes that guess is, I'm floating above myself. That's not saying the person is lying. It's saying the brain's model of the body can be changed. And when it changes under extreme conditions, the result can feel absolutely real. But here's where it gets more complicated. Some people report details they say they couldn't have known. A conversation in another room. A tool used during surgery. Something on a shelf seen from above. These cases are the ones people argue about hardest. There are a few possibilities. Sometimes the memory may be built from sounds heard while unconscious, because hearing can sometimes persist during states where a person seems unresponsive. Sometimes details are learned afterward and folded into the memory without the person realizing it. Human memory isn't a hard drive. It's more like a story that gets rebuilt every time we open it. But some cases remain difficult to evaluate because the details weren't recorded carefully at the time. If someone says later, I saw exactly what happened, we have to ask, when did they report it? Who wrote it down? Was it specific enough to test? Could they have guessed it? Could they have heard it? Could someone have told them? That's not debunking. That's just how you protect a mystery from becoming a rumor. A good mystery deserves clean evidence. Now let's talk about the life review, because this part feels less like a glitch and more like a personal movie with a moral engine. Why would the brain replay life memories near death? Memory isn't stored in one tiny folder. It's spread across networks. The hippocampus, a structure deep in the brain, helps organize memory. The emotional weight of memories involves other areas, including the amygdala. Under extreme stress, those systems may fire in unusual ways. You've probably heard people say, my life flashed before my eyes. That's not only from near-death stories. People in sudden danger sometimes report rapid memory bursts. A fall, a car swerving, a near miss. Time seems to stretch, and the mind grabs meaning fast. One theory is that when the brain is in crisis, it searches memory for survival clues. Have I been here before? What matters? Who matters? What should I do? That search could become a flood, but near-death life reviews often feel bigger than survival. People don't just see events, they feel connections, they understand consequences. So another possibility is that when the brain's normal filters loosen, emotional memory becomes unusually intense and integrated. Separate moments get woven into one sweeping story. And humans are storytelling animals. That's not an insult, it's how we understand ourselves. Your brain doesn't just store facts like, I lived in that house or I met that person. It turns life into a self-story. Who I am, what I did, what mattered, what I regret. Near death, when the self-story is under threat, the brain may do something extreme. It may summarize you to yourself. That's chilling. Also kind of beautiful. But what about the beings people meet? This is where culture enters the room. People from different backgrounds often report different imagery. A Christian might see Jesus. A Hindu might meet messengers connected to Hindu beliefs. A person who isn't religious might describe a presence, a field of love, or dead relatives without naming a deity. The core feelings can be similar, but the interpretation often uses the person's own mental library. That's how perception works in everyday life too. The brain doesn't receive raw reality and label it later. It predicts, fills gaps, and interprets constantly. If you're walking at night and see a coiled shape on the path, your brain may shout snake before you know it's a rope. Why? Because a fast guess can keep you alive. In a near-death state, the brain may be flooded with strong emotion, fading sensory input, memory fragments, and deep expectations. So if there's a feeling of a loving presence, the mind may clothe that presence in the most meaningful image it has. That doesn't make it fake. It means experience always arrives through the brain's language. A useful comparison is dreaming, but we have to be careful. Near-death experiences are not simply dreams. They can be more structured, more memorable, and more life-changing. But dreams show us something important. The brain can create entire worlds from inside. In a dream, you can see rooms that aren't there, talk to people who aren't present, feel fear or love, and wake up with your heart racing. The physical world didn't cause the scene. Your brain did. And while it was happening, you were inside it. Now imagine a brain under oxygen stress, chemical stress, emotional stress, and maybe medication, anesthesia, or trauma. That's not a normal dream machine. That's a brain at the edge, with ordinary boundaries breaking down. Speaking of boundaries, let's talk about time. Near-death experiences can feel long. Some people describe minutes, hours, even a timeless space. But the period when the brain is actually in crisis may be short, and we often don't know exactly when the experience happened. This matters a lot. If someone has a cardiac arrest, loses consciousness, gets resuscitated, and later remembers an NDE, the experience might not have occurred during the deepest flatline-like period. It may have happened as they were losing consciousness, or as blood flow returned, or during brief islands of brain activity we didn't measure. Your brain can create a huge feeling experience in a tiny slice of time. Dreams do this all the time. You hit snooze for 5 minutes and dream a whole story with a plot twist and emotional damage. The brain is not a clock. It can stretch time when memory gets dense. So the timing puzzle is tricky. People may honestly report, it happened while I was dead, but from the outside, it may be hard to prove exactly when the experience formed. Now, for one of the weirdest discoveries, the dying brain may not only fade, it may flare. In some animal studies, researchers have seen bursts of organized brain activity after cardiac arrest. There have also been rare human observations suggesting that near death, certain brain rhythms can surge briefly. Brain rhythms are patterns of electrical activity. Think of them like coordinated waves, not thoughts themselves, but the background timing that helps brain areas communicate. One rhythm people talk about is gamma activity. Gamma is often linked with attention, perception, and conscious processing. That doesn't mean gamma equals the soul or proves an afterlife. It means the brain may sometimes produce a final burst of coordinated activity during extreme shutdown. That's counterintuitive. We imagine dying as a dimmer switch slowly turning down, but it may be more like a storm before the lights go out. If that storm activates visual areas, memory areas, emotional systems, and the brain's self-location machinery all at once, you can start to see a recipe. A tunnel from visual narrowing, peace from pain control and dissociation, floating from body map disruption, beings from memory and expectation, life review from emotional memory networks. timelessness from altered time perception. No single ingredient explains everything, but together, they make the experience less impossible. And then there's chemistry. People often bring up DMT, a powerful psychedelic compound that can produce intense visions, beings, and a sense of entering another reality. The human body can make small amounts of DMT, and some have speculated that a large release near death could cause NDEs. It's an interesting idea, but it isn't proven as the master explanation. We don't have solid evidence that the dying human brain releases enough DMT at the right moment to account for the whole experience. Also, NDEs don't perfectly match psychedelic trips. They overlap in some feelings, but they're not identical. Still, psychedelics are useful comparisons because they show how small chemical changes can radically alter reality. A molecule can change how the brain filters information, how the self feels, how time moves, and how meaningful everything seems. Meaning is a big word here. One of the hardest things to explain about NDEs is not the visuals. It's the certainty. People don't just say, "I saw a bright light." They say, "I understood everything." They say, "I knew love was the point." They say, "I wasn't afraid anymore." The brain has systems that tag experiences as important. Normally, these systems help you remember danger, bonding, reward, and awe. Under unusual conditions, they can turn the importance dial way up. That's why some dreams feel prophetic, why a panic attack can feel like certain death even when you're safe, and why a psychedelic experience can feel like a cosmic truth. The feeling of certainty is itself a brain state. That doesn't automatically mean the content is true or false. It means the experience arrives stamped with authority. And that stamp can change a life. Many people who have NDEs report lasting changes. They may become less materialistic, more compassionate, more interested in spirituality, or less afraid of death. Some struggle too. If your family thinks you're exaggerating, or your doctor changes the subject, you may feel alone. If the experience was frightening, it can be traumatic. So whatever causes NDEs, they deserve respect. Not because every interpretation is automatically correct, but because the effects are real. Now let's ask the question everyone is thinking. Do near-death experiences prove there's life after death? Science can't honestly say that, not from the evidence we have. Science studies patterns that can be observed, tested, measured, and compared. NDEs are real reports from real people, but the most extraordinary parts are hard to test. If someone says they met a deceased relative in another realm, there's no simple instrument we can plug in to verify that realm. At the same time, science also can't prove that every NDE is just nothing. That's too lazy. The honest position is more careful. Many features of near-death experiences have plausible brain-based explanations, but the full experience remains difficult to pin down, especially in cases with unusual reported perceptions. That middle position may feel unsatisfying. People want a verdict. Either it's heaven or it's neurons. But reality might not care about our categories. Here's a better way to frame it. The brain is definitely involved. Every experience you have, from tasting pizza to missing someone you love, is connected to brain activity. So if a person has a near-death experience and later remembers it, the brain participated in forming, storing, or retrieving that memory. The open question is whether the brain generated the whole thing internally, or whether something else is involved that we don't yet know how to study. Different people answer that differently based on worldview, faith, and what kind of evidence they find convincing. But we don't need to fake certainty to be amazed, because even the brain-only version is wild. Think about what that would mean. In a moment when the body is failing, the brain may be capable of creating a final, vivid, emotionally overwhelming world. It may pull from memory, vision, fear, love, identity, and culture. It may build a passage, a presence, a review, and a choice. It may turn biological crisis into a story of return. That's not small. That's one of the strangest abilities nature has ever produced. And if you're wondering why not everyone has one, that's another clue. Many people come close to death and remember nothing, just blankness. Others have fragments, others have full NDEs. That variation could depend on the cause of the emergency, oxygen levels, medications, age, expectations, brain health, timing of resuscitation, and whether memory systems were working well enough to record anything. Remember, having an experience isn't enough. You also have to store it. If the brain can't save the memory, the person wakes up with nothing to report. So the absence of an NDE doesn't mean nothing happened. And the presence of one doesn't mean the brain was working normally. It means something got experienced and remembered. That distinction matters. Now imagine two people in the same hospital. One wakes and says, "There was nothing." The other wakes crying because they saw their father and felt pure peace. Same species, same planet. Completely different return from the edge. That's why NDEs are so powerful. They force us to admit that consciousness isn't simple. You can't point to one switch and say, "Here, this is the self." The self is built from body signals, memory, attention, emotion, and the brain's constant prediction of what reality is. Near death may scramble that system in a way that reveals how much of ordinary life is constructed moment by moment. The truly unsettling idea is this. Maybe near-death experiences feel supernatural, partly because normal consciousness is already stranger than we admit. You are, right now, living inside a controlled hallucination that mostly matches the world. Your brain takes electrical signals from your eyes, pressure waves from your ears, chemical traces from your nose, and pressure from your skin, then builds a stable reality so you can function. Most of the time, it works so well you don't notice the construction. Near death, the construction may become visible. The tunnel, the floating body, the impossible peace, the person who shouldn't be there, the life review. These may be what happens when the brain's reality-building system is pushed past its normal limits. Or maybe, as some people believe, the brain near death is not creating a world, but receiving or revealing one. Science doesn't have a clean way to settle that claim right now. So where does that leave us? With humility. And a better question. Instead of asking only, are near-death experiences real? We can ask, real in what sense? Are the reports real? Yes, people really report them. Are the emotions real? Absolutely. Are the life changes real? Often, yes. Are all interpretations equally proven? No. Are brain-based explanations strong enough to take seriously? Definitely. Do they explain every case perfectly? Not yet. That's the honest map. And maybe that's why these stories keep gripping us. They're not just about death. They're about what consciousness is doing every second we're alive. They're about how the brain turns electricity into a world, how memory turns a life into meaning, and how close the edge can be before everything we think we know starts to bend. So the next time you hear someone say they saw a light, or floated above an operating table, or met someone they loved, the most interesting response isn't instant belief or instant dismissal. It's curiosity. What did they experience? When might it have happened? What was their brain going through? What did it change in them? And why does the same cluster of images keep appearing in humans who get close enough to the edge to look over? Because whether near-death experiences are a doorway, a brainstorm, or something sitting uncomfortably between those words, they tell us one thing for sure. The border between life and death is not quiet in the human mind. It's bright, it's personal, it's confusing, and for some people, it becomes the most real moment they ever remember. If this made you rethink what being conscious even means, that's the rabbit hole. The deeper you go, the weirder ordinary life starts to look.